Welcome to the Healing Place podcast, a space filled with inspirational stories of hope, along with practical advice for your healing journey. Your host is Teri Wellbrock, trauma warrior, writer, speaker, blogger, therapy dog handler, and founder of the Sammy's Bundles of Hope project. As a survivor and a thriver, Teri's mission is to shine the light of hope into the world by interviewing insightful guests from across the globe. Please stay tuned at the end of today's interview as we honor our sponsors. The Healing Place podcast is a fiscally sponsored project of Fractured Atlas. Now, here's your host and trauma warrior, Teri Wellbrock.
Welcome, everybody, to the Healing Place podcast. I am your host, Teri Wellbrock, and excited to have with me today Jacob Reimann, and he is the founder of Inner Freedom Healing. So welcome, Jacob.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely, and very excited to dive into conversations about healing, and I want to talk a little bit about how healing our children and loved ones can help us heal. But first, just introduce yourself to people and tell them what it is you do in Inner Freedom Healing.
Hi, sure. So I'm Jacob Reimann, and I run a company called Inner Freedom Healing. And basically, we do two things. So first is I work with small kind of high need groups, up to 6 people, and we work online, and I kind of use my intuition and healing experience to really guide them through going from suffering of some kind, whether it be trauma or physical ailments or depression, anxiety, to joy. And I do that by really just guiding them so they can understand which parts of themselves, which parts of them that are still stuck in grief or anger or rage or trauma of some kind, and to sort of guide them to those parts of themselves in a safe way. And we basically spend time just accepting those parts of ourselves, and that's very simply that's how I understand healing works.
Yeah,
so
I love your message right there, though, of helping people to get through the trauma, but to get to that place of joy, because I think so many people who have been through trauma or in pain and suffering feel like they can't ever get to that place of joy, like it's an unreachable goal for them, and it really truly is possible.
Yeah, I was convinced it wasn't possible until recently. And I just kind of, and what I found really fascinating, I'll come back to the second thing of what we do, but what I found really fascinating in my healing journey was how I was so used to panic and being terrified, and just so when I was slightly less panicking and terrified, I thought that was actually quite good. I was like, oh, but then I kind of looking back on it, whatever experience I had, and I've had obviously a life of all kinds of things, I suddenly realized underneath the surface happiness and joy and relationships and everything else, I realized how much panic and terror there was just right underneath that kind of surface level of happiness. And once you start to actually heal that blob of terror, and then suddenly you start just getting more and more glimpses of just peace and silence. And initially kind of I thought, hang on, that's a bit strange, what's that? What's going on? But obviously as you do the work, then it can actually dissolve fully, and you can get to a point of just peace and joy, and it's quite an amazing feeling. I'm just getting used to it, I have to say, but yeah,
it is a beautiful, wonderful place to be. Yes.
Yeah. So that's the work I do with private clients. And then I kind of, about a year ago, I kind of thought to myself, well, I could just have a quite comfortable existence just working on a, you know, one-to-one, well, in small groups, you know, up to 6 people, and we basically share that healing space and share the journey. And and healings, I found, is a lot more effective if you're doing it in a group and you're all focusing on a similar aspect of ourselves that we haven't accepted yet, through our heart, through love and compassion. And then I thought, well, hang on, there are, you know, millions of people out there that maybe you know, can't afford private work, or don't have the time, or so how can I teach the process? How can I actually get it out there so people can, you know, learn it for themselves? And it's based on you know, breath work, intention, and acceptance. It's very simple, and I'm sure you've got a lot of experience with this kind of you know, approach to healing. So I'm you know, I've created a kind of mini healing course, which I'm just I've got about 20 to 30 people testing out now, giving me feedback, and I'm going to be reshooting it over Christmas and then launching it, you know, very low investment, so people can actually learn the process themselves but stay safe, which is really important as they're kind of you know, accepting and going through the bits of them that they'd rather not go through, but they're there, so you can't escape yourself. Right. But I think a lot of people have a real fear of facing those parts of themselves which are broken.
Yes, for sure.
And hurting. So it's those two things, and then there's a big sort of community that I'm planning, so people can kind of share you know, share the burden with each other in a safe, supported way.
Right. I find it fascinating, and looking back in time, I had severe panic attacks for 25 years. And
yeah,
one, I always thought I was just going to be broken forever, quote unquote broken. But two, that by avoiding things that triggered the panic, or by just constantly trying to push it away, and the trauma that was really creating those panic sensations, and not wanting to go back to the darkness because I thought it would make the panic worse. Well, that's what I had to do. I had to go back into that and do that healing work in order to process that. And now I don't have panic attacks, and now I'm free from it because I did go back in, which was scary. It was scary, but oh my gosh, it was liberating.
It's funny how it's kind of counterintuitive, you know, logically, and obviously a lot of these things don't have anything to do with logic, but feeling, and logically you think, well, that's making me feel bad, so I'm not going to go there.
Right.
But then after some time you think, well, hang on, that doesn't work. It just doesn't work, you know, avoiding it. And what I found for myself, it really started to limit my possibility, my potential in life, because then you kind of get into a way of living that's just very limited, just to avoid going there to those parts of you. And then looking back on it, I was like, oh my God, I was just so, you know, you get into this kind of, I suppose, a rut or a pattern that's kind of safe, but it was very limiting for me. And then it's funny how we work, isn't it? It's funny how we're made. Funny how we're made, built, created, whatever word you want to use.
Yeah, so true. And I love what you just said about getting into the rut, because with brain plasticity studies and learning to change habitual patterns, it is about, you know, mine was I was an avoidant behavior of don't drive on the highway because highways scare me. Don't go over bridges because bridges scare me. Mine had a lot of driving phobias that surfaced, so it was these ruts, like you said, that were created. But once I learned how to, you know, change those habitual patterns and do that healing work, someone once said it to me, like, as if you're paving over those ruts and filling it in, and then creating new roads and new pathways.
That's right. Right. Yeah, amazing. So that's really the sort of two things I do professionally, and really it was you know, it was out of necessity due to my own traumatic childhood, and, you know, 4 or 5 years of living in a, you know, dysfunctional, terrified mother and father, fighting and violence, and it was just, and it was so, and it was that time of our life when we're kind of supposed to be, building our view of the world, 4, 5, 6 years old. And, there was birth trauma, and then I lost, there was a brother I lost in the womb, and all kinds of just this ancestral stuff. And I just suddenly, I just went mad, about 3 years ago. I just couldn't, I'd been not accepting everything all my life. And it just got to a point, there wasn't anywhere else for my energy, for my emotions that I'd just not been accepted to go. And I just kind of lost it, and just, it was really not pleasant. And then I just got to a point, well, I just don't have any choice but to just accept this me. And it's been quite a journey, but it's and there are so many times when I thought it just can't work. It's not going to work. I'm cursed to suffer all my life. But then, you just breathe, and you just breathe, and I worked out how, the process I use, and it's wonderful just to be here and kind of give people some hope that there is a way through this. That's the key learning, and this is great that you're doing this as well.
Oh my gosh! Well, thank you. Yes, and thank you for being here, because my theme is hope for healing. I use that hashtag on everything, hope for healing. So the fact that you said, offering the audience, offering people who are listening hope is just huge, because that was, I didn't have that for a long time, and as trauma survivors, hope is what gets us from surviving to thriving. Really,
that's right. And to know that there's many processes and modalities, but there is one out there for you that will work for you. But I think what I find really important is that ultimately, though, there's always an aspect of responsibility to yourself, and ultimately, and all the people I work with, friends and family and clients, there has to be a part of them that wants to change, that wants to heal. You can get to sort of 60-70% maybe, but there's that core, I suppose, ego or sense of self that needs to want to come out of that, because it can be quite safe and familiar to suffer. And that having that sort of, that part of you that needs to want to change that can be the biggest challenge sometimes, just to get over that part of you that says, actually, I'm in a bad way, but I know who I am here. I know this suffering is familiar, and I don't, it's not challenging, and I'm just going to stay here. And some people can stay like that for a long time, and it's making that decision that, okay, I'm going to do something about it is really important.
Yes, my sister and I talk about it often, about comfort in the chaos.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just where we were, and until I finally hit that wall and said, I can't do this anymore. Beautiful. All right, so let's dive in a little bit about healing our children and loved ones, and how that in return heals us.
Absolutely. Well, so what because of the history, basically, of my parents being in conflict and real horrible stuff for many years, until I was kind of 8 years old, and then having a kind of traumatized but relatively kind of okay life through my 20s and 30s and early 40s. And then I basically started doing the work of acceptance and kind of connecting to the parts of us, with parts of our system, our subconscious, that are just freaking out, because the subconscious, there's no concept of time. If there's something that's some trauma that happened, as I'm sure you can kind of agree with. So if something happened when we were 8 that's totally terrifying, then it's still there until you actually go into it, right?
Right.
So so while I was kind of working on my own healing journey, I kind of realized that there was a big part of me, of my rage and terror, that was actually my father's. Yeah. And I kind of realized that when I set the intention that I'm working with the part of me that's my father, it's obviously still me. It's not his conscious, it's not his, conscious self, but it's his, because, we are from our parents, right? We are conceived. So we have their energy, consciousness as part of us, right? Obviously. And so when I realized that I was conceived with a lot of his rage, because he had a traumatic childhood, and his grandfather, and I suddenly realized, I was, okay, so it's not just us, it's our parents, and maybe the experience they've had, and obviously war or famine, or whatever it might be. Abuse came up a lot in my kind of family, and so and I sort of realized how how important it is. And then obviously if you have children, then that part of you is in them. So if there's a part of you that's traumatized, because at conception we are of our parents and of our ancestors, then it's really important to realize that it's a kind of cascade, isn't it, of who we are, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's really powerful. I mean, I've talked about it before, and I've heard about it before, but just the words that you just said about your father having rage, and I mean, it's resonating with me, because I really never thought about it in that kind of angle before. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah. And so and then a lot of the work I do is also for obviously emotional issues, but obviously physical health challenges as well. And when you kind of realize how much of your physical body can be due to having just stress and trauma from your parents, and how it all just kind of fits together, it's such a fascinating kind of patchwork of things that make us who we are, right? So coming back to the point about the parent thing, so if you have children and you heal aspects of yourself, then obviously that of you in them will also be healed, right? Because we're of ourselves, but obviously we have our own uniqueness and personality. So it's kind of, I suppose you could say, there's the parental bit and your unique consciousness, and it's a kind of combination of these things, right? And then I realized that basically the more and it's just about accepting with compassion, but being focused on the right parts of us. Yeah. So I suppose the trick is knowing, well, what am I actually focusing on to heal, to accept? What is it? And once you kind of work that out a bit, and that's one of the main thing I do is how do you know what you're focusing on? Where am I putting my attention to heal, to accept this part of me? Once you do that, you start to realize how what we want to have from our parents is just the love that they felt for us. Yeah. And whether they could consciously do that or not, that's a different thing. That's their own life story, life history, which we can also accept. So if there's rage from my father because his mum left him, she had to run away from the communists, and it was all really terrible for him, but he was repeating those behaviors in his marriages. My mum was wife number 2 out of 5, and etc., etc. But the point is that there's a lot of unaccepted emotion in that whole story, right? So once you realize that that the anger that I may have been feeling at some point, I was like, well, why am I even what it's there, you can't deny it's there, but why am I getting angry about that? I mean, Christ, that doesn't make any sense. And then I realized, oh, okay, well, I'm also my dad, right? So then it was a process of accepting that, and then you sort of get to a point where you've kind of accepted everything, and you can start to feel joy in a very simple way.
Yeah. I like to think of it as like this big ball of Christmas lights, and it's all tangled up, and we just have to untangle it, and it just you talking just made me think about kind of untangling the parts of my dad and the parts of my mom that are wound in there with me.
Yeah,
And
of course.
yeah, really cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I love it. So another question that I wanted to dive into is how our lives are a reflection of how our subconscious mind is. So can you touch upon that a little bit?
Of course, yeah. So for example, so the way I see us is that basically, let's say, for example, you might you might be repeating the same behavior that doesn't serve you. Okay, it might be in relationships or with career or financially or whatever it might be. Okay, so there's always a reason that we're not enjoy, and we're not just just glad to be alive and just going, wow, this is amazing, I'm alive, I'm just here looking at my garden, I'm talking to this wonderful lady on the other side of the planet, and we're talking about really important stuff, and it's like, well, that's just amazing. That what else? What I don't need anything else, right? But if we're not, then obviously there's something in us that's going, oh no, or this is terrible, or this is terrifying, or you shouldn't be doing this, or you can't do that, or da 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 da. And there's obviously somewhere in our subconscious there's an energy field of somebody's emotion, whether it's our unaccepted experience, or from our parents, or if we've been in a relationship for a long time, or from our grandparents, whatever it might be. There's a part of us that's ultimately rejecting what is. There's a part of us that's saying, I don't want this, I want something else. But you can't have something else, because what is. I am sitting here talking to you, right? I can't argue with that, but there's a part of me that might be going, yeah, but I shouldn't be doing this, I should be doing something else. And then the more of these parts of us that are wanting to not be just here in this moment in joy, the more conflict we have in ourselves, and the more that kind of plays out in our life, doesn't it? Right? Because we might not know where we're going in life, we might not know who we are, we might want to keep on choosing things that a part of us wants but isn't actually in our interest. And so that's what I mean by that, just as that kind of, if we're not in joy and wonder in this moment, there's a reason for it, and it's our job to kind of work out, well, what is it, and to heal that part of us.
Yeah, beautiful. I practice mindfulness practices almost every day, and it's exactly for that thing. I mean, I'm that crazy lady that stops and notices the ladybug and says hi to it, I mean, because it really is about finding the joy in the moment, and being at peace with the now and what's here, right here. Yeah,
exactly right. And the ego, the part of us that keeps on wanting to rush ahead and rush away and not just be here, and mindfulness, and I suppose every spiritual practice is about lessening the influence of that. So obviously it's us, it's not about getting rid of it, but just rebalancing between that and the kind of essence of who we are, and kind of getting that balance back, so you can live your practical life and pay the bills and everything else, but do it in a way that's joyful and in wonder, rather than just being fully wrapped up in it, so that you can't actually enjoy the moment.
Yeah, very powerful point. What you just said is not getting rid of it, because that's so true. The trauma, the history, it's still a part of who we are, and it's not a matter that you're going to make it go away forever, but it is about part of what your theme and you work with is acceptance, and it is about accepting that yes, this happened. Do the healing work. It's still a part of you, but you can still live this amazing life filled with joy and tranquility. Yeah, for sure. Beautiful.
There was one of the my teachers from years ago said, ideally you want to look at your trauma like a kind of South American soap opera. You're sort of just looking at it going, oh, okay, that happened, and everyone's going, but ultimately it's okay, that's the story, and I don't have to, the emotional charge of it that has been healed, and it's just part of my life. And because it's not often that, I suppose, even in the deepest of trauma, it's not happening. Well, for some people this might be different, but even when I was going through my total terror and horror as a little child, obviously there was still other stuff that was not traumatic going on in the day, but obviously you blank all that out, and you just remember all the really challenging things, right? But I still grew up, and I still learned how to talk, and I still learned how to walk, and so it's about getting that perspective and balance. And unless you've accepted, and by accepting I mean not just that you go, yeah, okay, I accept it happened, but on a deep level where you accept that emotional charge. Every time you said, this shouldn't be happening, I shouldn't be getting shouted at, or my parents shouldn't be arguing, that's a rejection of reality, right? And that rejection of what is happening, that's what stores up in us, and that's that becomes the trauma, because then we're full of this terror and panic and rage and everything else. But through mindfulness, acceptance, but actually being with it, and kind of looking, having it on your heart, and that might take some time, you can then actually dissolve that emotional charge of yourself, of your parents, and then you can actually get that inner peace. But it's that doing that work by acceptance, not just going, okay, I accept it happened, because then that's just an intellectual thing, isn't it?
Yes, right. It's almost a soul acceptance, and you're right. It's the acceptance part in the processing, in whatever way that I did EMDR therapy for 4 years, along with a lot of other practices, Ho'oponopono, and prayer, and there was just a lot involved in my toolbox to process it. But yeah, you're right. It is about releasing that stored up negative energy is how I thought of it. And the only way that it knew to come out with me was through panic attacks. It was trying to get out of me, and it didn't know how. Amazing. Beautiful. All right. So anything else that you wanted to touch upon today that we haven't had a chance to?
I think what I find also really, you mentioned EMDR, and what I found really fascinating is how all these trauma patterns can just be stored in our nervous system, and how we can have this constant fight or flight, panic response, which things like EMDR and lots of not that many things I've found in my time actually can get to that, get to the level of the nervous system, because obviously the nervous system is just responding to what messages it's getting from the brain, right? So, and if the mind is panicking, the nervous system goes, right, I'm in danger. So I've had quite a journey of discovery on kind of looking at all the reflexes that get triggered from trauma, and how the nervous system can in many ways kind of still think that it's still it's 40 years ago, and this is happening, and this is happening, and this is happening. And obviously the reflexes can come up with things like dyslexia, right? So if you've got dyslexia in children, then a potential cause of that is the nervous system just not firing properly, because there's some perceived trauma or danger that's still happening. So working with the kind of intention and acceptance, and more on the kind of neurological level, has been a real, really important way of kind of bringing together the more kind of acceptance, the more I suppose spiritual side of it, to the brain and to the nervous system, and how you can sort of bring them together to sort of speed up the healing process. And obviously MDR is part of that, isn't it? Because it's a way of getting the eye eye movements and the nervous system to kind of release some of that trauma.
Yes, for sure.
So I found that really fascinating, and how many people have some kind of stress response from the environment that is related to some kind of unresolved trauma, which they might not be aware of, but then they go, oh, you know, my tennis serve is really bad all the time. I don't know what it is, but I just can't get the serve right. Everything else is fine. And then you sort of look at that from a kind of, you know, nervous system point of view, and then you can sort of work out, oh, okay, but there's a nervous system reflex going on which is stopping you from doing that serve, for example. So anyway, I could go on for hours and hours.
I'm right there with you. I could too. I read the book that Dr. Shapiro, so I guess the I don't want to say the founder of EMDR, I can't think of the right word, but so she had written this book, Getting Past Your Past, and it's about EMDR and really her journey into how this came about. And one of the stories, I think it was in this book, and I'm not quoting it for sure, but it was a story about a man who couldn't, he was getting a promotion at work, but he was going to have to speak publicly, like speak in front of a group of people, of peers or something. And he had a horrific fear of speaking. And so he did an EMDR session, and in it, he went back to, because EMDR is about going back into childhood or traumatic events. And he went back to this time where he was walking with his grandfather, like on this country road in West Virginia or somewhere. And he was about 3 or 4 and just yammering away at his grandfather, just telling him a story. And they came across an old farmer, and the farmer said to the grandfather something along the lines of, well, if I had a youngin' like that, you know, talking at me like all the time, I'd put him in a bag and drown him like a bag of kittens. And so that one little moment, the old man was probably joking, who knows, but it had this profound impact on him that speaking would then, you know, people want to kill you for that. It's child's logic, right?
Yeah.
But it becomes this phobia, this fear that's instilled. And so just by going back into it and realizing it and being able to say, oh, that's what that comes from, he was able to move on and let it go, and then take the promotion and speak and not have any more issues.
Excellent. Wonderful.
But that's how it works, and how it's in there. Yeah. So it's such a fascinating kind of tapestry of things that make us us, isn't it? And how we can actually kind of choose to say, right, well, I'm going to start this journey of healing, and get all of me to be fully here in the moment, in joy. And it's amazing to see how many people are on that journey. Yes, for sure. Well, my gosh, I'm so grateful for you and the work you're doing in the world, and shining that light of hope and helping people, really guiding them down that road. So thank you.
Thank you.
So how do people find you, get a hold of you? And
the website is innerfreedom.uk. So that's one word, innerfreedom.uk. And they just need to go to innerfreedom.uk/hello. And then I list there the healing course that's launching in January, so they can register to get the latest news about that. And I also, they can find out about my small VIP group healing programs as well.
Wonderful. All right. Okay. Well, again, thank you for being here and joining me today on the podcast.
Thank you very much.
All right. Everyone, thanks for joining us today. And remember, until next time, be gentle with yourself. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening today to the Healing Place podcast with your host and trauma warrior, Teri Wellbrock. If you enjoyed this episode and want to learn more about Teri, her mission, and the Hope for Healing journey, visit Teri's website at www.teriwellbrock.com. Thank you for liking, commenting, sharing, and offering your reviews on our YouTube channel, audio outlets, and Facebook page. And as Teri reminds us, until next time, remember, be gentle with yourself.